George Bush Sr., the 41st President of the United States, was the last U.S. president to have seen combat. Unlike many of his predecessors who also served in the military, Bush had a particularly unique experience in World War II. He narrowly avoided being captured and potentially eaten by Japanese soldiers. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. At that time, Bush was just 17 years old and a senior at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. The attack fueled a surge of patriotism across the country, and young George Bush was no different. Eager to enlist, he initially thought about joining the Canadian Forces. However, he decided against it because he wanted to be a Navy aviator. Despite being underage, his determination to serve in the U.S. Navy remained strong, and he soon found a way to enlist and become an aviator. Shortly after turning 18 and graduating, George Bush Sr. enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserves on June 13, 1942. About a year later, he was commissioned as an ensign. At just 19 years old, many considered him to be the youngest pilot in the U.S. Navy at the time. In the spring of 1944, Bush was assigned as a pilot to the USS San Jacinto, a light aircraft carrier. He arrived just as the U.S. was engaging in a strategy of island hopping against Japanese-controlled territories in the Pacific. Despite his youth, Bush quickly gained combat experience. He flew missions over Marcus and Wake Island and was also part of the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, one of the largest air battles of the war. During the final day of the Philippine Sea battle, Bush faced his first crash. After completing his mission, he was forced to land his aircraft on the water. Luckily, he and his crew were rescued by the destroyer USS Clarence K. Bronson. However, his second crash was much more harrowing. As the U.S. forces continued their advance in the Pacific, they began a new campaign in the Bonin Islands in August 1944. It was in that same month that George Bush was promoted to lieutenant junior grade. On September 2nd, George Bush was given a specific assignment. He was to lead a team of 3 other bombers to destroy a crucial radio tower on Chichijima. This tower was essential to Japanese communications. As soon as their aircrafts entered the island's airspace, they were met with intense anti-aircraft fire. Bush's plane was struck just as he initiated his bombing run towards the target. Despite his plane catching fire and the cockpit filling with smoke, Bush remained focused on the mission. He continued his descent and released the bombs. It was only after confirming that the tower had sustained damage that he directed his now-burning plane back towards the USS San Jacinto. When he felt they were at a safe distance from the island, Bush and 2 of his crew members exited the plane using their parachutes. As he made his descent, Bush looked back to observe his damaged aircraft as it continued on its uncontrolled trajectory. As George Bush hit the water, he faced immediate challenges. His flight suit became waterlogged and heavy, his head was injured, and his eyes were irritated from the cockpit's smoke. Struggling to stay afloat, Bush had the good fortune of landing near a life raft. He managed to grab it, inflate it, and climb inside. However, he faced another issue. The wind was pushing him toward Chichijima, the island still under Japanese control. To avoid drifting closer, Bush began paddling with his arms to maintain as much distance from the island as possible. During this time, he was noticed by the Japanese forces on the island, who dispatched boats in an attempt to capture him. These boats were turned away by American fighter planes that were patrolling the area. For the next 4 hours, Bush floated in the raft while American aircraft circled overhead to offer protection. His ordeal finally ended when a lifeguard submarine arrived and rescued him. Several other airmen were shot down and also escaped by bailing out, but they would not be so lucky. Those 8 aviators who were captured suffered severe torture from the Japanese soldiers on the nearby island. They were either beaten or stabbed with sharp bamboo sticks, after which they were killed. The most horrifying part was that the bodies of 4 of them were used to prepare a meal for the Japanese officers. Japanese surgeon Dr. Raki removed the liver from one of the dead U.S. pilots and handed it over to the cook. He then prepared it with soy sauce and vegetables and served it in little pieces, pierced with bamboo sticks. Major Mayday Toba, in the company of other officers, and commander of the island General Yoshi Tachibana, feasted on this gruesome meal. They believed it was good medicine for the stomach and would imbue them with greater health. Bush was unaware at the time that some of his fellow aviators who were captured had met a horrific fate, a secret that remained undisclosed until much later. It wasn't only after investigative work by historians that the truth was released to the general public. Returning to combat after his harrowing experience, Bush was again deployed to the USS San Jacinto, where he participated in missions over the Philippines. However, due to the high number of casualties suffered by his unit, they were eventually sent back to the United States. In September 1945, George Bush Sr. was honorably discharged from service. Throughout his military career, he flew 58 combat missions. had 126 carrier landings and logged 1,228 flight hours. Among his various missions, the one over Chichijima was exceptionally impactful, earning him the Distinguished Flying Cross. As he later claimed, these were the moments that he remembered for the rest of his life. In August 1946, Lieutenant General Tachibana and 11 other Japanese staff were put on trial. They were accused of killing U.S. Navy airmen and eating the flesh of at least one in August 1944. The laws at the time did not clearly cover cannibalism. So, they were tried for murder and prevention of honorable burial. A war crimes trial looked into the case in 1947. Out of 30 Japanese soldiers who were tried, 4 officers were found guilty. These officers included Lieutenant General Tachibana, Major Matoba, and Captain Yoshi. They were hanged as a result. All the other soldiers and probationary medical officer Tadashi Teraki were let go within 8 years.